Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Tuesdays with Story. You're probably wondering, where's the Angels Awakening trailer? Well,
You missed your chance.
yeah. The campaign is closed, so I got nothing to shill. But okay. I will give a quick update for those of you who didn't see the updates on uh, the campaign page. I've ordered proof copies for the book and for the poster as well. So I should be getting those in a few days. Once those, if or yeah, I should say if they pass my eye test, then I will go ahead and get to work on printing everybody's books and everybody's posters. And fingers crossed, end of the month, fulfillment will begin. So fun times, fun, exciting times.
Yep.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in my accomplishments, I just noticed that I had deleted my internet history to try and fix an issue, and I hadn't uploaded my usual avatar. So here's this one of Soren instead.
Yes. Yes. And speaking of Soren.
Yep, I'm DB Fastbinder, also known as Darth Bobcat. I write the Confessions of the MAGPIE Wizard series. Book 3 progress. My 2 beta readers have gone over it. So now it's just a matter of me making the changes and getting it up on Amazon, getting a cover. I'm probably not going to hit my original goal of a early October release, but late October, early November, I think I'll get in there somewhere.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm trying to get back into reading it since I don't have a whole lot of things to watch. I'm going to be reading, so I'm definitely going to be picking up and reading this book and the next one, and then all the other Magpie Wizard books after.
Yes, and on my writing end, my Rose book, which I keep calling a Rose book as though that's like the actual title, Saga of the Storm Wizard, is coming along nicely. It's a spin-off featuring fan favorite character Rose.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one too.
She has weather powers and not so much control over them.
Yeah,
which is a problem.
Yes. It should be for an interesting read, interesting story. So, Bobcat, you are saying something. What are you saying?
I'm saying, buy my
book! Buy my book! Buy my book!
Jay Sherman, you son of a bitch, you cut me off. You stepped on my line.
Yes.
Also, hi, Cengiz.
Oh, hey, Cengiz. Good to see you.
All right. So, this week, we're talking a little bit about the writing of villains.
Yes.
Now, to kind of set the stage here, you can have a story doesn't necessarily have to have a villain. You can have there's like the basic plots: man versus man, man versus nature, man versus God, man versus society, things like that. So we're not talking about Daniel had this example when we were chatting before the stream. We're not talking about the meteor hitting the Earth in Armageddon. We're not talking about the tidal wave in the perfect storm. We're not talking about institutional racism. We're talking about a villain who is a person with a social security number and or a face to punch.
Yes, and there have been some really great villains like that throughout fiction in various media forms, and there have been some that have been pretty lackluster.
Yep, and our discussion here is we're not the end all be all, as we always like to say, but we're guys with opinions, and we think we know what makes a good villain.
Yes, and I would say the villains that I've crafted for my series are going to be some of the most dastardly, evil, psychotic people you will probably see in a lot of fiction.
Well, that's a high bar you set for yourself there.
Yes.
Yep, and my villains, well, We'll get into dear Maggie
Oh,
because she's the villain of the first 4 books of Magpie Wizard, and she has an interesting arc because broadly speaking, there are a couple of ways you can characterize your villain. So a popular one is the relatable villain, the understandable villain. There's an obvious word that is escaping my mind here. The justified villain. It's basically like a villain where you learn enough about their backstory that you understand why they're doing what they're doing. And you as the audience can actually sympathize with them, even if their methods are too extreme.
yes, and I would say, just off the top of my head, first example of that would be Ed Harris's character in The Rock.
Sympathetic villain. Thank you, Chang.
Yes. Thanks, Changus. Yes.
Today was a day, so
Yeah.
if the words do not come to me, that is why.
Yeah.
So yes, another great example of a sympathetic villain is Magneto from the X-Men series, because you have a survivor of the Holocaust who ironically goes on to become a supremacist of his own race and wants to alternately separate from or wipe out the humans.
Yes.
Interestingly, that wasn't there from the start. That wasn't in any of the Stan Lee comics. That was added in later.
Wasn't in the Claremont ones either, was it? Or
I
kind of?
I think if it was added in, it was during the Claremont era, I would think.
Okay, yeah. Well, because I mean,
he ran it. He wrote it for 16 years. I mean, that's probably
right. Yeah.
If it's good, Claremont was at least on the sidelines of it.
Right. Yeah. And I think Magneto led the X-Men for a little while.
Yeah. The X-Men have a weird, circuitous history.
Yeah. Well, you got a comic book series that's been around for almost 60 years. I mean, that tends to happen.
That is true. That is true. Yeah. But so the sympathetic villain, it's very popular these days. I would go so far as to say it's too popular, and that's something I've heard in more than one circle, because it's also just kind of the cartoon villain. Sometimes you don't need a lot of nuance. Sometimes you just need a villain who's an awful person and needs a good thumping.
Yes.
It's very and you can actually run into a problem when you mix up what type of villain you're doing and how you're willing to betray and treat them. So, who's a good mustache twirling villain? Snidely Whiplash, actually, the original mustache twirling villain from the Dudley Do-Right cartoons.
Yes.
I'm just going to go ahead and pull him up because not everybody is versed in the classics.
Yeah.
That's here. What? That's here. Yeah, that's a good pick of him. Let me go ahead and share my screen here real quick.
All right. Yeah, that's a good one, Changus. Megatron. Yeah.
All right, so pulling that up. Well, we can get into Megatron in a sec, but Snidely is like just a good example of a classic villain. Why does Snidely Whiplash keep kidnapping Belle?
Nell.
Well, because Mel.
Sorry.
Okay.
Nell.
Sorry.
Nell.
No, that's right. Yeah. Why does he keep kidnapping Nell? Because something inheritance. He's a greedy jerk.
Yeah.
He always has some sort of scheme to get some gold or something.
Yes.
People can do awful things for non-complicated reasons.
Yes. Same with Gargamel in the Smurfs.
Right. He alternately wanted to eat the Smurfs or turn them into gold.
I don't know. One of the two.
Yeah, it seems to vary depending on the episode.
Yeah.
But and Changus, you're right. Megatron is another guy. Well, Megatron wasn't abused as a kid. Optimus Prime didn't give him a cyber swirly on Cybertron. He wasn't kicked out of Cyber Chess Club and swore revenge.
Yeah. He's just a bad guy.
He just wants to rule everything. Is that so much to ask?
Yeah.
But you can really diminish a villain if you accidentally treat this wrong. Because if you have a mustache twirling villain, the fun of the mustache twirling villain is that the audience can kind of vicariously live out all of the evil fantasies and ideas that they have.
Mm-hmm.
Like Scott Adams, the writer of the Dilbert comic strips, has said before that Dogbert is what he would be if he wasn't afraid of getting caught. Dogbert, for those who don't know, is a little dog who is always running schemes and scams on people to and just being a general awful sociopath.
Yes.
And so you kind of get to see like the bad example of these people, and it also it's kind of like to use a Simpsons example. In one episode, they were Krusty the Clown Krusty the Clown was doing auditions for a sidekick, and Sideshow Bob's brother Cecil comes up, and Krusty just looks at him once and says, "Next, like, please, I've prepared a pie." Okay, fine, knock yourself out. He gets hit with a pie, and he goes, "You see, the problem is that the pie gag is only good when the target has dignity."
Like that guy.
Yeah. It points at Bob, and then, hey, give that man a pie, and he just like immediately loves the way he gets hit by pies because he has something to knock down.
Yes.
Well, it's kind of a similar thing. Megatron, the whole episode's like, those cursed Deceptor, those cursed Autobots will never see through our plan to steal the moon. And he'll talk up how great and fiendish he is. And then he just which makes it all the more satisfying when, I don't know, Optimus Prime gives him a cyber swirly. I didn't really watch a lot of G1. I was more of a Beast Wars kid.
Well, yeah, Megatron, yeah, he would, he'd concoct some scheme, and yeah, that's basically what it was. Yeah, he'd have a scheme, and then to rule the world, to rule Earth or whatever, and
get
then
Energon or whatever.
Get Energon, yeah, and then Optimus Prime and the Autobots would fool his plans, or and Starscream is right behind him, ready to shoot him in the back if he needs to, and
yeah. Yeah, and Starscream is a good example of a sub-villain because I would almost argue that there's a level where Starscream is more memorable than Megatron because Megatron is the mustache-twirling villain. Starscream is the guy who can't manage to be a mustache-twirling villain.
Yeah. Yeah, he wants to be the mustache-twirling villain, but he just can't do it.
Even in the movie, he managed to finally kill Megatron, and Orson Welles' Death Star comes out of nowhere to turn him into Super Megatron.
Yes. Will anyone else attempt to fill his shoes?
That movie's got some great performances.
It did. Yeah. Leonard Nimoy playing Galvatron was really good in that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing where in voice acting history, Leonard Nimoy would get brought in to originate a role in something expensive, and then Frank Welker would pick it up for the actual show. Yeah.
Fun fact, Frank Welker actually voiced a young Spock in Star Trek 3.
That's great.
Yeah. But yeah,
that man is a national treasure.
Yes, he is. Him and Peter Cullen.
Yeah,
both of them.
But anyway, so let's to go back to before we diverged into examples of silly villains. Let's say you have like a really serious villain, like let's see. I'm trying to think of a villain who you wouldn't want to know about their backstory because that would diminish them.
Joker.
Okay, yeah, Joker's a perfect example of that. So with the Joker, they kind of go, and there's pluses and minuses to this. There isn't like a definitive answer on who the Joker actually is.
Mm-hmm.
It's partially because of what the Joker represents. He's chaos. He's he is man's he's man's lack of empathy and just desire to do whatever he feels like.
Right.
If you know for certain that he is that because he was an Iraq veteran whose got his scar from an IED, like some of the script treatments seem to imply for that movie. Or if you know that he was Joe Chill and he was the one who killed Batman's parents.
Oh, I haven't
Yeah.
heard that one.
That was, I want to say that was in the
That was
Tim Burton movie.
Tim Burton. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Like, if you actually know who he is, some of what makes him so terrifying goes away. Because the more you know about him, like people are generally empathetic, especially with characters on the screen who they learn about. Like, the more you know about a character, the more you tend to like them, even if you disagree with it. It's like, okay, I've gotten a little bit invested in their life now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you do that with a villain, and then it completely changes the dynamic.
Right, like what if Batman can go, Joker, what would Private Sanchez say? I don't even know that name. Looked up your file.
Yeah.
Said it was your best friend at West Point.
Yeah.
And you said you were going to start a bakery together. Interviewed his mom. Said you were always a nice boy. Says you should come home. Yeah, your mother's worried about you. Like, suddenly knowing all these things about the Joker makes him, like, you can sympathize with him more, because, like, oh man, he was going to go start a bakery with Private Sanchez after the war, and oh man, that's awful.
Yeah.
Poor Joker. You don't want to be thinking poor Joker. He's not that type of villain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, meanwhile, there's actually a perfect villain in that circle to have that conversation which is Harley Quinn.
Mm-hmm.
Because Harley is meant to be a sympathetic villain, but she's only a sympathetic villain because the Joker isn't.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know what the Joker can do. You don't know why exactly he's doing it, but you know what he can do and what he's about. It's like, oh, Harley, no, sweetie, no, you can do better. Wait, stop.
Yeah. Well, yeah. What gets me about Harley Quinn is that, I mean, she was a psychiatrist, and she obviously wasn't a very good psychiatrist if she was.
Well, she did in the origin comic they had for her. She did sleep her way through school to get better grades.
Okay, that would explain.
They understandably left that out of the cartoon treatment.
Yeah, or the DCEU.
Yeah, which I've had arguments with friends about whether that's a good thing or not. I think it actually kind of it's like, the question is, do you want Harley to be completely innocent before the Joker derails things, or do you want the seeds of that evil in her to start with?
I think if you're doing a good villain origin story, it would have to be the latter. You'd have to kind of you have to have like little nuggets of potential, like with Harvey Dent in The Dark Knight, where
he has an angry streak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. It's just kind of like Harley is such an interesting case because, man, talk about ruining a villain.
Yeah.
So for those who have not wasted their life watching cartoons like me, so Harley Quinn started off as the Joker psychiatrist. She fell under his spell, fell in love with him, and she started seeing him as a sympathetic villain because he kept making up a backstory about what he was. It's like, the only time my old man was ever happy was when we went to the circus. He loved the clowns. Mm-hmm. They'd make him laugh, and then he'd beat me.
Yeah.
Which later in that episode, Batman said, "So, which one did Joker tell you? Huh? Yeah. Was it about the hockey rink or was it about the circus?"
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Just like how did I get? How I got these scars? Yeah.
Right? You don't want to actually find out that the Joker was beaten as a kid, because then you feel sorry for him, which takes a lot of the fun out of watching Batman knock his teeth out.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, which I will say that's probably the one weakness of the Joker movie with Joaquin Phoenix is they kind of did that with him.
Right. Well, and it makes sense when he's the main character.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Although,
Actually,
yeah, and also, sorry to
no, you
interrupt.
go ahead.
Of course, he's an unreliable narrator too. So
Right. He is kind of clinically insane.
yeah,
And that actually brings up an interesting point: the difference between a hero, a protagonist, a villain, and an antagonist.
Mhm.
So hero and villain implies some sort like a moral framework that like you're saying that person's the good guy, that person's the bad guy. But
Mhm.
you can, and most stories are told from the perspective of somebody that you think is basic. Like I should say, historically, most stories were about somebody who is meant to be like an example to people. It's like,
Mhm.
oh man, it sure is hard to fight in these Peloponnesian wars, but man, when I think about all the cool stuff that Hercules and Achilles did, that gives me some courage.
Mhm.
Or we're out here doing the right thing. Or, oh man, it's really hard for, and to bring in a religious example, oh man, it's really hard for me not to covet my neighbor's wife, but hey, Jesus up there on the cross, uh, man, he really took that one for me, so I should probably try to like be worthy of that.
Yeah.
Uh, but let's see here. Uh,
There's,
yeah. So the Joker is a good example of a story that uh, that kind of goes out of that kind of framework, which is why
yeah.
protagonist antagonist is maybe a better way to talk about some characters in some stories,
Yeah.
because it's like the Joker is not a good person, but he is a put upon person that you can sympathize with.
Mhm.
Like you could, it's kind of the perfect example of like from the Killing Joke comic book, though, the one bad day can just snap somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that was the whole like he was a failed stand-up comedian, and then his pregnant wife dies, and then he's got to go and do this robbery, and then ends up going into the vat of acid, and
Yep. Uh, and so that's a version of the Joker that I don't care for, just because again, knowing where the Joker comes from, he becomes much more sympathetic.
mhm.
I also tend to don't like versions of the Joker where Batman is as obsessed with the Joker as the Joker is obsessed with Batman. I feel like the Batman Joker dynamic is best when Batman can get pissed off at the Joker, but he isn't sitting around thinking about, I wonder what the Joker's doing right now.
Yeah,
The same way that the Joker is thinking about Batman. In a sense, Batman is almost Joker, or Joker is almost Batman's Harley Quinn, the obsessed follower who.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. You kind of it's that dynamic between hero and villain is kind of we see it's another thing we see often is the hero and villain, and I know you were going to bring this up at some point, but them being mirror images of each other.
Right, like the MCU drove this right into the ground.
Yes.
Who's so Captain America's a super soldier. Who's his villain? The Red Skull, the Nazi super soldier.
Yeah.
Okay, who's Ant-Man's who's Ant-Man's villain? Oh, it's Yellow Jacket. What does Yellow Jacket do? He turns small.
Yeah, you got Hulk. Oh, who's Hulk's villain? Abomination. Who's Abomination? Oh, he's a big Hulk.
He's the Hulk but stronger.
Yeah.
Iron Man, Ironmonger.
Yeah.
Black Panther, Killmonger.
Well,
There are
Thor and Loki.
Thor, Loki. Yeah, so it's basically like every character's villain is their mirror image somehow, which you can go too far with that. But at the same time, like you got to have a villain who reflects the hero in some way, or else they don't. Like or else they can have a fist fight, but they can't really have a conflict.
Yeah.
Like say Darth Vader shows up at the X-Men mansion. they're going to fight, but is there really like a moral anything? Like Darth Vader doesn't care about mutants. The X-Men don't know what the dark and light side of the Force are. They'd fight, but they wouldn't have anything they were really fighting over.
Yeah. Like, why are we fighting? I don't know.
Yeah. Like, well, I don't know. I just crash landed here and you just assumed I was a villain. Well, Bub, we're attacked like 6 times a year. What?
Yeah. Our house blows up all the time.
Why do you think we moved to Krakoa? And so there's like and like Batman and Joker are good things. Like it's not like Batman's enemy or evil opposite is dark Batman or something like that. It's a different enough thing that it makes sense.
Yeah, and and it's also too kind of I would also say like a reflection in terms of their morality as well. Like for me, like an example of that is kind of a close example would be like Dirty Harry and the Scorpio Killer in the first Dirty Harry.
Oh man, I have to admit I've never seen that movie, but I know about kind of the broad strokes of it. But I know
you have never seen Dirty Harry.
So basically, imagine that I have parents who were squeamish growing up, and so if it was a cool movie, I probably didn't see it.
I'm surprised. Like your father wouldn't have shown that to you. My father showed that movie to me.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to psychoanalyze anybody.
Okay.
But basically, that's your. If it was a cool action movie, if I've seen it, I saw it in my 20s.
Okay.
Or 30s when I thought of it. Like I only just saw Predator for the first time last year. Yeah. See that slump. See that slump for the shoulders.
Jeez. But that's okay. Well, actually, let's go with Predator for a second because that's kind of a interesting villain because he's not. His motivation is just hunting and killing, and seems to have intelligence but doesn't really communicate.
Right, like he does all sorts of interesting stuff. Like he copies their sounds to mock them.
Right. Yeah, and he's one ugly MFer.
Yep. And he's a reflection of Dutch in that they're both hunters of sentient people or sentient beings.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and Dutch is I forget they were basically a mercenary team, right? They weren't actually special ops at all.
No, they were special ops. They were search and rescue.
Oh, that's right. So yeah, they're both hunters of people in a sense, so they're both like able to rack up huge body counts.
Mm-hmm. But Dutch is tries to save lives more often than not, and then Predators just wants to kill things.
Yep. And the way that Dutch ultimately wins is by abandoning all of his weapons and just fighting the Predator on his own terms.
Yes.
By becoming the hunter.
Yeah. I need to watch that movie again. I haven't watched it in a while.
Yeah, it's an awesome watch.
Yeah.
There are some movies where I will go like, why was this big? That was not one of them. That's like, I immediately understood why they've spent the last 30 years trying to unsuccessfully to make a sequel to match it.
Yeah. Although I will say the second Predator 2 wasn't bad with
that's what I heard too.
Yeah, Danny Glover. That was a pretty good movie. But yeah, all the other Predator movies after that are trash. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So that's like where they have to be fighting over something or about something. Like you could probably do Spider-Man versus Predator, but it's like, would it really be all that interesting? You basically would know that they weren't about to rip out Spider-Man's skull and no matter what. So Spider-Man's basically safe, and like Spider-Man already has a bunch of villains who love to just pile up bodies.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like, what would adding Predator to the mix really add any danger to it or any intrigue?
Probably not. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Chuck Dixon was talking about an idea that he had for a crossover that got poo-pooed by DC higher-ups when he was working there, which would have been the Blackhawks versus Predator. Which
Hmm.
for those who don't know, Blackhawks is a World War II comic book series that DC has published off and on since the 60s and 70s, at least. Uh, which basically, so would have been in North Africa. A predator would have landed there and was picking off Nazis and allies, and it would have been the Blackhawks teaming up with their opposing squadron on the other side to try to deal with the predator.
Hmm.
If no, it wouldn't have been the Blackhawks. It would have been Sergeant Rock. That makes much more sense because that would have been the on the ground infantryman.
Yes.
So that's like oh, that actually sounds really cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Because that then you just have these guys who don't know what they're dealing with.
Yes. Yeah.
So to kind of go back, we talked about how you can ruin an unsympathetic villain by adding too much sympathy. You can also ruin a sympathetic villain by making them go too far. So to steal one from one of Wes over at Thinking Critical's streams, they were talking about how well, the Batman villains just keep coming up because Batman has such a nice wide array of villains that you can practically find a villain to talk about any topic you want to talk about under the sun.
Mm-hmm.
They were talking about how you have the Mad Hatter. The way the Mad Hatter is presented in the animated series is he's a lonely schlub who falls in love with the girl at work, where he's working on these devices that can control rats, and he's working up the courage to ask her out, and then he finds out that she's either married or engaged and snaps because he's wrapped up so much of what he was going to do with her. And so he mind controls a bunch of people, and Batman has to take him out. Now, that's an awful thing to mind control somebody, but it's like, oh, man, if you'd just known how to express yourself better,
Mm-hmm.
or if you'd been able to like deal with rejection, you wouldn't be too bad of a guy. You just took that one step too far.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it didn't help either that the girl's name was Alice.
Yes. Yeah, he had his weird Alice in Wonderland obsession too the whole time.
Yeah, yeah. Hence the Mad Hatter persona. Yeah,
Like he was practically doomed there.
yeah.
But, and then in the New 52 comic book series, Batman, they revealed that he was involved in a child trafficking ring. Or he may have actually been a lover of cheese pizza himself.
Oh god.
I forget the actual detail. So the problem is, you can, once you go past that point, you can never make him sympathetic again, not without blasting that out of continuity.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, but the girl I liked didn't like me, and I've always been alone. Yeah, that did take a dark turn for a relatively light-hearted, silly villain.
Yeah. That escalated quickly.
Yes. And so, you can once you have him do that, okay, like, are you sure? If the villain does that, you can never actually make them sympathetic again.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Maybe it's good for this one story, but if you've always targeted this character as vaguely like not as bad as the rest, then you've kind of lost that.
Yeah, yeah. He's not the kind of, I hate to say lovable villain, but certainly not as not the evil, like Joker or Two-Face or
Exactly. He's kind of more in the same category as the Penguin, where you like. I would say that of all of Batman's rogues gallery, the Penguin is the least villainous overall when he's portrayed right. Like, think about the later Batman stuff where he just owned a nightclub and was pretending to be a legitimate businessman.
Yeah. I actually like that version of the Penguin.
Oh,
Yeah,
most definitely.
yeah, yeah.
Because you basically know that the Penguin is not going to go too far, which means that if you had a moment where, oh, let's say you gave him a wife and suddenly his wife was kidnapped by a villain and he suddenly went very far, you realize, oh, he's been holding back.
Hmm. Yeah, sort of like Kingpin in Marvel.
Right, exactly. Except Kingpin's, oh, he's just, yeah, ever since Frank Miller got a hold of him, oh, he's just been a dark mofo.
Yeah, yeah. I will say, like, that was probably one of my favorite parts of the Netflix Daredevil was Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin. Like, he always rode that edge between like being, somewhat sympathetic and kind of like, oh yeah, because he really loves Vanessa, and he wants to make her happy and give her a great life and all this other stuff. But then you turn around and he's beaten that reporter to death. I can't remember his name.
Ben Urich.
Ben Urich. Yeah, he's beating him to death, or he's chopping a guy's head off with a car door, and
yeah, it's and that's actually an interesting thing. Like, it's not that your villain is either sympathetic or unsympathetic. It's like a gradient, because you can have it. You can ride that line quite a bit, because and it also kind of depends on the tone of your series. For example, that Mad Hatter story would never have flown on the animated series, because why the heck would you do that?
Yeah, it's not age appropriate.
It's also like, are you going to actually go into like the realities of child trafficking? There was actually a set of Punisher comics where they were talking about the problem of human trafficking in Eastern Europe, and they actually did a bunch of research, and this like in the 2000s. Let's say it was.
Was this Garth Ennis?
It was Garth Ennis or the other British guy who I always confuse him with. The one who got canceled recently.
Warren Ellis.
Yeah, it was either Garth Ennis or Warren Ellis. I always mix them up because I basically think they're the same writer secretly. This is probably inaccurate and unfair to both men, but who cares?
Yeah. I do the same thing. Yeah.
So it's like that whole sympathetic unsympathetic line is one that you have to ride carefully. But so to go back to something I said I was going to get into earlier, I have my villain Maggie Edwards. Now, if you were to write a story from her perspective, it would be the story of how a young, promising girl joined the Wizard Corps because she had magic powers, and then she and her friends were deployed to fight in Madagascar when an army of demons tried to make landfall there, and the corrupt, evil, or the corrupt government of the world, the Anti-Demonic League, wouldn't give them the support they needed, and so it was a horrible, awful fight. And afterwards, but it was okay because she got out and she fell in love with one of her squad mates, and then discovered that her squad mate was carrying on an affair with some Instagram thought. And after that, she could never trust anybody in authority over her or her peers again. So she turned to getting close with her students, and eventually she crossed a bridge she shouldn't have crossed. But hey, they were all 18 or 19, so that's all cool, right? Right.
Yeah.
We thought that she used her own position of power to manipulate anybody. She just loved her boys.
Yes.
And then, she was teaching in England, and then England fell, and her favorite at the time, Soren, died in the invasion. And then she heard that Soren had been found, and she was so hopeful. And then she showed up, and there was the devil Malthus who had taken his name.
Mm-hmm.
and she knew it wasn't him. So she proceeded to torture him for a bit, but realized that he was skilled enough to be useful to her new organization, who was there to overthrow, or at least to guide, the corrupt Anti-Demonic League to a new generation. And then he betrayed her again at a key moment, thus foiling the attack and everything she'd ever built, leading to her own death. So that's basically like the long arc of her character. You could totally write a story from her perspective where she came out as totally sympathetic.
Mm-hmm.
In Magpie Wizard, she is not particularly sympathetic. Like, she plays at being a sympathetic villain, but at the end of the day, she keeps making awful choices and being very vindictive and arbitrary.
Well,
like she's basically she's an awful person. She just she's just quick with the excuses. Oh, it wasn't me. It was, Alan left me, and I saw horrible things in Madagascar when the devils invaded, and my home country fell, and I had to flee to Japan with the other refugees. But my Soren was left behind because he was on the second helicopter, or he would have been on the second helicopter that they never sent because they were overwhelmed, and yada 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 yada. So it's just she's just a pile of excuses.
Yeah.
And a major chunk of Soren's where she reflects Soren being a devil is actually more willing to accept responsibility for the bad stuff that he's done than she is.
Yeah.
He has lines that he won't cross because he cares about the people around him. Maggie, even as she's leading the attack, has plans of, well, if this goes badly, I'll pretend I was one of the hostages too, and no one will be around to disagree with me.
Wow.
Because she was wearing disguise magic at the time. So she could say that she was using a pseudonym during the attack. So it was basically just she's a horrible, miserable coward.
Yeah. Man. Yeah. You've got a really very dynamic and very just a very unlikable villain.
Yeah.
Or a villain you love to hate.
Right. And that's the whole point of her, is that you're writing along and it's like, oh man, is Soren going to actually go along with this? Like, it is like and she also keeps trying to, she alternately hates Soren, but because he actually fights back, she finds him interesting. So it's also like a weird, what's the YouTube appropriate way of describing this? She would love to have lovemaking of the hateful variety with him.
Yes.
To prove that she could make him do that, but also to satisfy her own because she would feel like that would be her having power over him. Like, she is all about control. Oh man, I love Maggie so much, just because she started off as just like, in my very first draft, she was just like, oh hey Edward. My very first draft, she was just like the villain's sidekick. And then at some point I said, you know what? The villain is basically just Diet Magneto. Let's make Maggie the villain.
Good choice, I would say.
Yeah. Because she reflects the hero much better. Well, for purposes of this story, he's a hero.
Yeah. He's kind of a hero.
Right. Yeah. Reluctant hero.
Yes.
Also, as a reminder, if you buy my book, I can get more art like this.
Yes. We all love seeing art like this.
Indeed.
Yeah. So I would say I don't want to get too far into with my characters, or at least my villains, but I can say a little bit about. I'll say a little bit about Skye. So she's basically, she's a water elemental, and the elementals in the Britannian Empire are basically or they are the nobility. But she is a little, cuckoo, and so her family basically just and is go a little bit from the lore pages that are in the book, but because she's a little cuckoo, her family kind of just like just go away, you're gonna have to earn your place in our family and all that, earn your place in the empire, and you got to do basically grunt stuff. So she's got to do all this stuff that a lot of elementals wouldn't necessarily do, and part of that is, of course, trying to trap a spy from the Republic.
Gotcha. So her deal is kind of she's having to do stuff that's beneath her, which I bet riles or rankles her a bit.
Oh yeah, yeah. And let's just say that it doesn't get any better for her.
I'm assuming that unless you kill Jessica off in the very first comic. Oh darn! Did I just reveal the spoiler? Sorry.
It's fine.
Yeah. Oh, so you're admitting that you do kill Jessica off in the first issue of Angel's Awakening?
Yes, she dies. Yes, they all die.
Rocks fall, everybody dies.
Yes. But that's the thing. Like a lot of the, I will say this, like the female elementals tend to be a little.
Do you have a similar thing with the male elementals, or
a little bit? Yeah, they're a little more tempered, but yeah, but they're just as batty. Yeah.
Gotcha. So they're better at hiding it.
Yeah, they're better at hiding. Yeah.
And that makes them actually an interesting reflection on what like having noble power can do to somebody, because like you just become totally detached from everyday life and concerns and just turn into kind of a monster if you don't have that sense of responsibility to go with it.
Yeah. Maybe.
Now, when they all sync up and it happens all at the same time, we call it Ragnarok. Because that is disastrous.
Yeah. How's your wife? How's your kids? Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's basically like that's kind of where I wanted to go with the sympathetic versus unsympathetic. I would say that would it be fair to say that sympathetic has kind of been in the ascendant for a long time?
Yeah, I would say for about the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I think it can go further back than that.
Yeah.
And I think that there are a couple of things driving that. One is that there is sort of what I would call a reassessment of who the heroes and villains are in society, and a wild disagreement on it. I think that's part of why a lot of popcorn movies don't really have like a villain with an identifiable background, because it's much easier to go, oh, he's he's Thanos from space. He's crazy. He wants to snap his fingers and wipe out half the populace. So we have to fight him. Like nobody can really get offended by that, unless you're unless you're one of those human extinction project people who's like, yeah, everyone needs to stop breeding because humans are bad for the planet.
Yeah.
Like they'll say, hey, we don't like being represented like that. First off, Thanos only goes by half measures. That's actually like Thanos is a weird case, because in the comics, he was actually driven by love and insanity. Like he was a complete nihilist. He loved the idea of destroying everything, and he wanted to make the universe a gift for Lady Death, who he thought was banging, even though she was a skeleton.
I think in the MCU they were gonna do that.
I can kind of see the case for it and against it.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, Thanos is almost a pathetic character at times.
Yeah.
Because he rides this very interesting line between sympathetic and unsympathetic, and he can switch from protagonist to antagonist very easily depending on your story. Because he isn't thoroughly evil.
Yeah.
He has goals that are kind of odd, and he has very few compunctions about how he achieves them. Whether it's just, do you prefer the idea that he's simping for Death, who won't give him the time of day? Or do you prefer the idea that he has a fundamentally skewed idea that wiping out half the population will fix everything?
Yeah.
Which the villain, like the heroes, weirdly, and this is like the strange thing about that movie. If you watch it again, nobody ever like wants to have a chat with him. Like, no one ever has the villains be like, "You're insane, Thanos."
The only one that had a conversation with him was Doctor Strange, I think.
Yeah.
Any kind of conversation like that.
Yeah, it's interesting because in a comic book, like if you had a comic book where Iron Man was the primary enemy of Thanos, I would think that you'd have a scene where they would like, "You're mad, Thanos. This plan will never work. What happens when people just breed again in 100 years? Are you gonna half the universe again?"
Yeah, he'd probably say yes.
Except that, I guess, unless he knew that he would destroy himself using the stones for that much power.
Oh, yeah.
Congratulations! Oh, and you destroyed the stones. The only thing that can do the population halving that you think is necessary. Please tell us again how you're not just kicking the can down the road a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, he clearly didn't think it through.
Nope.
Yeah, and it was even worse in Endgame, where he's like, "Oh, I'm just gonna take the universe down to the last atom, and then just build a new universe."
Yeah, at which point he becomes every JRPG villain ever.
Yeah.
Like it's almost amusing how predictable it is if you're playing a Final Fantasy game from like that era, from like the 90s and the 2000s. Nope. Pretty boy with long hair. I bet you want to destroy the world as it is and rebuild it in a better image, and you're going to talk about the corruption and despair of the current order.
Yeah.
Hey, Sephiroth slash what was the name? Seymour from Final Fantasy X slash the guy from Final Fantasy VI.
Yeah. You're did you play Persona 5?
I haven't played any of the Persona games now.
Okay. I've only played 5, but yeah, the villain in that one, same thing. Yeah, he's gonna destroy the whole world.
I'm guessing he's like, "Oh, there's so much waste and corruption and evil out there. I'll build it in a new, better image."
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a weird case of like an unsympathetic villain trying to wear the trappings of a sympathetic villain.
Yeah.
Kind of almost the Maggie thing, though less pathetic. Because like they would tell you, no, I'm here to stop all this waste and evil, and just it's just that convincing people isn't working. I wrote strongly worded letters to the editor every week for a month, and
I wrote to my congressman and my senator, and
yep. I tweeted at the president, and just nothing happened. So genocide.
Yeah.
That's the logical next step.
Yes. Jeez.
Mind you, and that's also like a plot that nobody can disagree with the hero for killing some villains over. I think that's why we see those types of broad things so often. It's like, well, what does the villain want to do? He wants to kill everybody. Okay, I don't care whether you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent. I think that we can all agree that we want at least half the population alive.
Yeah.
What's this villain doing? Oh, they're shooting a laser beam into the sky, which will summon the dark god Cthulhu. Yeah, no, nobody wants that.
Yeah. No, we definitely don't want that.
Yep. Meanwhile, it's like, oh, well, what are you fighting? Well, and this is actually a plot line in a number of recent Marvel comics. Well, what are you fighting? Well, says Ms. Marvel, some rich industrialists are buying up parts of the city to gentrify it. Those darn white people. Well, they're gonna improve the neighborhood and force out all the people who are. These are our slums. We've been living here for generations.
Yeah.
That nothing is allowed to get better.
Yeah, yeah. We want to maintain our right to live in squalor and filth and degeneracy and darn it, yeah.
Exactly. So it's like with that type of plot, you're stepping into an actual real life social issue. So you're going to at least have some disagreement.
Mm-hmm.
Much the same way that like I'm going to do a silly example. So Captain Catholic, what's your plot this week? Oh, we're going to picket outside of an abortion clinic and hand out flyers, and that's our plot this week. That's hardly a villain at all. It's that's where we're talking like we don't want to talk about like when you're fighting big scale things, because it isn't like I don't know, there isn't like a Captain Capitalism you can punch in the face. There isn't a gentrification man who you can stop.
Right. Yeah, there's no like person there that's yeah, there's no face you can punch.
Right. Okay. Yeah. COVID doesn't even have a face you can punch.
No.
Yeah. So it's I think another thing, and we're getting close to our end here, but that's why we wanted to talk about villains and not antagonistic forces, because you can totally do a story about privilege, gentrification, social inequity, but a colorful action story starring a superhero is probably not the best way to approach that.
Yeah.
Because it raises questions.
Yes.
Like if there are problems with racial injustice in Gotham, does Bruce Wayne just not care? Has he not had the conversation with Jim Gordon? Jim, I've been looking over the crime statistics. Jim, this is very important. You need to do better. Bruce, sorry, Batman. Did I say Bruce? I'm sorry, I don't know. Batman, I'm sorry, I just can't take you seriously when you use that voice. What voice? Bruce, Gordon, Jim, Gordon, their lives matter.
Yeah.
Oh, and then at the end of the story, okay, so they've fixed it. Okay, so they fixed the problem. Does that help anybody in real life? No. It's just wish fulfillment at that point.
Yeah.
Or what if they fail? I'm sorry, Batman. We've gone over, and it's just too ingrained in the department. We'd have to fire everybody, and only bastards want to be cops in Gotham City. Curses.
Okay. Why isn't my spine book coming?
Coming, Quataniel. I'm gonna read.
Yeah. Because I couldn't find it. I couldn't fit it in between the shots of Jessica's booty.
How dare!
Yes.
All right. So we're getting close to the end of the hour.
Yes. Yes, we are.
So does anybody watching have any questions?
Yes. Because I think we'll try to do that from going forward at the end of the show. If anybody's got questions, we'll do a little Q&A. So.
Yeah. But by the way, I think that the Batman voice from those movies is like the most ridiculous thing ever. Like anything you say in it sounds stupid.
Where's the trigger?
Yeah. Where are they?
I don't know how he didn't blow his voice out doing that.
Yeah, you wonder, don't you?
Yeah, it's just God. Yeah, I don't know if I would rather have that or Ben Affleck's voice modulator. I didn't like Ben Affleck's voice modulator.
Uh, what about villains who are pure evil but really charismatic?
Hmm.
See, charisma is a false way to gain sympathy.
Yes. See, when I think of somebody like that, I think of like a cult leader.
Right, like somebody who can, somebody who can like as I used to say, sell ice to Eskimos,
Yeah.
like who can just talk you into anything. Um, it kind of depends on the presentation,
Mhm.
because you can definitely have a villain who is pure evil like that, um, but still be oddly likable in their own way.
Very, very devilish.
Yeah, exactly. And like actual demons are a great example of that. Actually, even the Joker's a great example for that, because he convinced Harley Quinn that he liked her,
Yeah.
uh, and that he valued her, even though he clearly didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
that's the thing, is like your villains got to have something to make the audience like them, because like there are villains that the audience likes to hate, but you don't want them to hate hating them. There's like there's a point where if the villain becomes too awful and there's just nothing that makes them interesting to watch, you just start going, please just go. Can they just die, please, please?
Yeah. 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 I'm trying to think of a villain that would apply to that. There was a. Did you ever? I don't know if you ever watched Burn Notice.
Um, nope. I do have the disc sitting on my desk or table right now, but
Well, there was a God, I can't remember one of the later seasons. There was a villain in there that was just like, can we just get rid of this guy? I'm so sick of him. Like I'm just like I just want to get rid of him. Yeah,
oh, like the writers really enjoyed writing them, but you didn't like watching them.
yeah. Well, and I will say the actor who played him was really good, and that might have been part of it too. But
Right.
yeah,
Right. It's in wrestling they call that go away energy, where where it's like yeah, there's like booing with the heel. It's like, oh man, you're so awful, boo. I wonder what'll happen next. And then there's boo, we hate you. We don't
yeah.
even want to see you get beaten. We just want you to go.
Yes, just get out of here. Throw him out of the ring. Get him out. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's all of the time we have for tonight. Bobcat, any final words?
Um, buy my book. I don't know. I think we had a good discussion there,
Yes.
because the villain is going to be one of the major influences on how well your story does if you're doing an action adventure of some sort.
Right.
Uh, so you want to make sure that your villain matches the story. Sometimes you need a sympathetic villain. Sometimes you need an unsympathetic villain. And to what degree they should be sympathetic or unsympathetic kind of depends on the story.
Yes.
Uh, and you want to make sure you don't accidentally tilt it too far out of what your story actually needs. Because if we find out that Thanos, when he was a young child, had a kitten named Death who fell off of a cliff, and ever since then he's been looking for death, uh, uh, and what killed his kitten named Death was that his mother left a bottle of half and half out on the cliffside the kitten jumped for. And ever since then, he's been obsessed with the idea of having things. then you've taken away from the gravitas and seriousness of the character. Another example of how to kneecap your villain, in the original Dragon Ball movies, the reason that the villain Broly hated Goku is that when they were babies together, Goku cried very loudly, and it irritated him. So yeah, so motivation is important. Yeah, you got to actually have it make sense in the context. But yeah, you just balance things out.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So, well, I don't think I have anything more to say on this subject. I think we've, like as you said, I think we've covered it very well. Buy Darth Bobcat's book, Confessions of the Magpie Wizard. Link is in the description down below. Give us a like. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. All that good stuff. And I just lost Darth Bobcat. All right. Well. All right. Oh, there he is.
It's the wrong thing.
Oh, okay.
No.
So, all right. Again, no Angels Awakening trailer because
Yeah.
Angels Awakening's closed.
Sorry, guys, you had your chance.
Sorry. Yeah. Maybe not. Yeah. There will probably be a next time, more than likely. So, but yeah, that's all we have for tonight. So, good night, everybody.
Good night.